Downtown Geneva, we can see on some walls tags written in large character, words like CLIT or VULV. Did you see it?
I haven't, but I'm going to start looking carefully.
I saw a poster at the bus stop saying, "Every girl has a clitoris. Why nobody told me I have one?" But me, when I was 9, I did not need anybody to tell me what my penis was about and how to use it. So why is it different for girls?
So I think at some level, I mean, there are layers on this, but at some level, it's simply a matter of anatomy. That is to say, the penis is outside the body in a way, and in order to urinate, you're not taught to urinate by sitting down. I mean, you could do that, but in fact, what you do to urinate is you handle your genitals, you handle your penis, you point it at something. So you're touching it, you're developing a sensitivity about it, you're certainly aware that it's there. Whereas little girls do have to be shown. I mean, they may touch it, but they don't handle it day to day in order to go to the bathroom. And when they're toilet trained, they aren't trained to touch it and hold it and point. They're told to sit on the toilet and pee. And so it does require a kind of simple instruction for girls just because of how the anatomy is, I think. And then there are other, there are other things, more cultural layers attached to the meaning of a penis. I also think, I mean, maybe not everybody knows, but even tiny little baby boys have erections. They're involuntary, but they're there, and once they're there, after a boy is 6 months or 8 months or 10 months old, they're aware of them. And I'm pretty sure that little girls have erections in their clitoris too, but they're less obtrusive. They may, and a little girl may not even know what they're feeling. And it certainly doesn't get in the way that an erection does for a boy. So I think there's the basic anatomy of being a smaller organ, being a big part of it being internal, and only a small part of it being external. And how you use it to go to the bathroom could explain that.
Would you think that it would be relevant to have a special education for this matter?
I do. I think that, at least in the United States, any kind of sex education for small children right now is very taboo because people are hysterical about the idea that children have sexuality. I don't know if that's true here also, but I think it's really only among kind of progressive parents in the United States that little girls are taught their anatomy at a very young age.
This won't change, do you think?
Not right now, I don't think. I think in the United States, I think we're in a very conservative moment, and a very fearful moment about sexuality, especially with regard to children.
Would you be surprised to see the picture I've been showing you in Boston or in the US?
Yes, and it's interesting because they remind me of the women's self-help movement from the 1970s, which was a moment when women were, but these were women, not girls, they wrote their own, Our Bodies, Ourselves. That was a populist health textbook that was written by a collective of women and only became commercialized later. But the big thing was for women to take medical care and self-knowledge away from the medical profession, and that included learning about one's own genitalia. So I was joking yesterday with Celine about this, but so there were, the mirrors and the speculum so that women could look at their own genitalia that was a thing in the 1970s. But it didn't remain a movement, so that there's a cohort of women who went through that, but it's not a movement today for younger women. And there still isn't really a good sex education movement, but now there are things like Our Bodies, Ourselves, so that a girl who's determined to find out about herself has a resource that can help them do that. But I think that sex education by parents for children is very uneven. Again, there are some progressive parents, of course, that do. And in the schools, it's become almost impossible because of the moral panic about child sexual abuse. I think it's the only way that I can think of it. It's a moral panic.
Why pink is associated to girl and blue to boy?
Oh, well, that's an interesting historical question, because at least in the United States, there's historians who have looked at this. And what's important to know is that it wasn't always the case. So in the 1910s and 1920s, it was actually reversed. And pink was thought to be a masculine or male color, and blue a female color. So exactly why it changed is not certain, but it certainly doesn't have, right now it's maintained because it's an important marketing device. And interestingly, just on my Facebook page, with friends who have young boys now, children 8, 9, 10, apparently pink is returning. So some American athletes have started using pink shoes when they play basketball, and the pink as a shirt color for men has become very fashionable. So that may be changing again.
Who profits of the actual duality? Who does not want to see it change?
Well, I think there's the obvious economic import of getting back to equal pay. I mean, women have been an underpaid labor category. Women do unpaid labor. So not only are they underpaid in the workforce, but all of the labor that is done to reproduce society, that is the labor to raise children, has traditionally been unpaid. So overall, there's a big profit to that, in that it's kind of free work. And if you began to change that and say this is work that deserves pay, it involves a major reorganization. It would involve a major reorganization of our social system, even at simple levels of giving paid leave to women to bear children and stay home for 6 months. Say it in the way that, say, to the degree that, say, the Scandinavian countries do, where fathers also get extended leave. In the United States, we have no national maternity leave policy, and it's all, everybody just sort of does what they do. They find a grandmother, or they find a sister, or they have to pay a lot of money, or they stop working, but there's no system to doing it. And a system would be helpful at one level, but it also would cost money at another level.
Do you think this will change?
Yes, I do think it will change. And I think it will change.
Another question from my friend. She has a little girl and she's very questioning about the sex of her dad and her own sex. So how can we deal with this duality?
Well, that's the right age. I mean, this is right in the period when children are figuring out about gender, sex, sexuality, identity, and so why wouldn't you start to try to explain? I mean, you obviously have to find concepts and words that a 3-year-old can use or can understand. But this is exactly the age at which these ideas are beginning to become concrete to children.
maybe it's important for a child to see the difference and to choose for himself and answer, who am I? So maybe the wrong in this duality is to say a man should be like this and a woman like that.
Yes, I think ideally what we want are teaching tools for 3-year-olds that talk about a spectrum of possibilities. We want parents who say, you know, you're a girl, by which I mean you were born with a vagina and ovaries, but that doesn't mean you can't wear pants or play football or, you know, and doesn't mean you have to play with dolls if you don't like them, but you can if you do.
You have been working on this subject for all your life. What would be your perfect world?
It's a good question. My perfect world would be a world in which it was possible for children to express themselves however they felt like expressing themselves, in terms of gender and behaviors and interests, and that it just wouldn't matter whether they had a penis or a vagina. They wouldn't have to. The notion of gender identity would be limited to reproduction and not limited to, and would not include gender expression.
Do you have an intuition about how will be sexuality in 50 years?
Very different. I think it's hard to predict, because even as I say limited to reproduction, I realize that of course with reproductive technology now, that's already changed. So a lesbian couple that wants to have a baby can have artificial insemination. A gay couple that wants to have a baby can use their DNA for a surrogacy, and they can even mix their DNA to have a surrogacy, so they can, you know, even reproduction with the current technology isn't strictly limited in the way it was. So it's a different world.
Do you feel enthusiastic about it or not?
No, I feel okay about it. I mean, I was very skeptical of reproductive technology when it began to develop in the 80s. And I do still think that that there are certain kinds of things about it that I don't care for. But it has also opened up this other world that's expanded parenting possibilities and expanded notions of gender and reproduction. It's changed the kinds of families that can exist.
And about the fact that a woman can choose the quality of the spermatozoid in sperm's bank?
I think it may be a false choice. That is, I don't think we know as much as we think we do about what DNA, how DNA produces. So I'm concerned also about sex selection. I'm not a big fan of sex selection. I also think that one aspect of reproductive technology is that it's extremely, physiologically, it's an extremely harsh procedure on a woman's body. And that continues to concern me. I mean, the hormone injections, the extraction of eggs from the ovary, these are not benign procedures. So that aspect of it does concern me. That's why I say I'm not a complete enthusiastic. But I also see, like many technologies, there are aspects which can be transformative, and there are aspects which can be negative.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.